Now people don't talk to one another anymore in the evenings. They used to be outside their huts looking at one another. Now they stay inside looking at screens. Burma, Far Eastern Siberia, that little figure you see right there in the middle of the screen, that's Lenin. On top of him is an enormous screen, advertising yet another screen. He'll be turning in his grave. Tonga, isolated island in the South Pacific where, in fact, DVDs arrived and they noticed big changes in young people. Mali, West Africa, Bolivia, Cambodia, no electricity or technology in that village. The kids seem fine to me. And Sumatra, a small village up in the hills. Social networking arrived. I was there. The biggest change the doctors, the teachers, the police, and everybody else told me was that young people were busy chatting to the screen to children in other parts of the world 7 or 8 hours a day. I sat in the cafe, and at the end of the day, some of the same young people were there, and I asked them, but do you chat to people in your own village? No. Well, who are you chatting to? Oh, someone in Greece. Have you ever met them? No. Will you ever meet them? No. So I've witnessed firsthand what happens when social technology arrives. It's not the problem of social technology, as I said. It's the way it is being used and the way that I'm observing it when I travel the world and also back home in England. Now, I did a study what I did was to in fact, collapse a lot of data looking at the last 20 years. How many hours and minutes a day did people spend looking at real human beings and interacting in 1987? And how many did they do it come the year 2007? The blue line shows face-to-face interaction. It's dropped dramatically over the last 20 years. The red line is eye-to-screen contact, electronic media use over the last 20 years. You can see around the year 1998 to 9, life became virtual, particularly for young people. And with that has come many changes that I am concerned about. And again, it's not the technology, it's that line up there. It's the amount of time. The average screen time in Britain, this is just 4 years old, by the way, 4 or 5 years old, 11 to 15-year-olds are spending 7.5 hours a day, 53 hours a week. That's 55% of their waking lives in front of screens. Most of it ain't with your educational products, by the way. A study, Stanford University, looked at time, quote, time spent using the internet is negatively associated with time spent with family and with time spent with friends. For each hour on the internet, 30 minutes is lost in face-to-face interaction. And there were lower wellness scores, psychological well-being. And again, it's not the fact that they're social networking or using the net. How much time are they spending doing it? And is it displacing face-to-face contact with people they care about? It is at the moment. Looking more specifically at the brain, so-called interactive computer games. Studies of that, the simple one that I've got here, published by the World Federation of Neurology, which isn't a tech magazine, by the way, they found that so-called interactive computer games caused a limited neurological activity, reduced cerebral blood flow. Quote, it only stimulated activity in those parts associated with vision and movement. Click, click, click. And their conclusion was, computer games are halting the process of frontal lobe development and affecting children's ability to control antisocial elements of their behavior. This is alarming. Computer games stunted the developing mind. World Neurology. And again, this is a journal most of you haven't read. You need to know about these things, in my opinion. Something just published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This ain't a comic book, by the way. What they did was to deal with what we're told. We're told that, isn't it great, these young people can multitask. They can look at different screens, different windows, and it's preparing them for the future. They'll be able to deal better with the future because they're doing more multitasking now. So what the scientists at Stanford University did was to take the students who did a lot of multitasking every day and compare them to the students that didn't do much multitasking or didn't do any. And guess what? Those that didn't do much multitasking, quote, the conclusion, heavy media multitaskers performed worse. The shocking discovery of this research is that high multitaskers are lousy at everything that's necessary for multitasking. And that's one of the important things. If you introduce certain forms of technology too early, instead of being a help and an aid, they can actually prevent the young people from developing the skills we want them to develop. The National Foundation for Educational Research looked at the effects, one of the effects of technology on reading. For the first time in British history, quote, "Comics are the most popular reading material. They are now the favorite enjoyment, Enjoyment of reading stories and information books has fallen." And again, part of this is due to increased internet use and computer game use. Looking at some of the specific effects, which I'm very worried about, more to do with your field, education. A study at King's College, a very, very big study, which has just been published, looked at what we call high-level thinking, interpretive thinking. This is the kind of thinking that really is deep analysis. It requires sustained concentration and attention. They're finding now that 14-year-olds today have the same high-level thinking skills of 12-year-olds in 1976. Half as many 14-year-olds now exhibit higher-level interpretive thinking as opposed to quick, descriptive thinking. And the quick thinking comes from click, 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 lots of decisions, changing your attention a lot of the time. And they concluded, quote, "Everything in the past 30 years has speeded up. It's about reacting quickly but at a shallow level. Text messages in computer games is about speed and instant hits rather than more profound or detailed ways of handling information." And this is one of the subtle qualitative things that's going missing, that with lots of opportunities on a screen and lots of entertainment and lots of choices, sustained, deeper thinking seems to be going missing right now. And one of the main things they're finding is that increasing time spent in the virtual world of screen technology is displacing, quote, "hands-on play and learning that allows young people to experience how the world works in practice and make informed judgments about abstract concepts." In other words, young people and children need to first upload information about the real world before they can use technological tools to their best benefit. And the balance isn't quite right yet, I'm afraid. Looking again at, for example, social networking. A lot of people say, well, you know, it doesn't really affect academic performance, it's just a bit of a waste of time. Well, a new study published by the American Education Research Association here in 2009 looked at precisely this: Facebook use and lower grades in university. And they concluded, quote, "There's a disconnect between students' claim that Facebook use doesn't impact on their studies and our findings showing they had lower grades and spent less time studying." Some of the more human qualities also seem to be affected by technology. Looking at the parts of the brain which are linked with the very human things, which we might think are vague but are important in terms of our children's development. Surfing the internet has been found, when they look at the consequences, areas of the brain associated with empathy showed virtually no increase in stimulation. And the scientists concluded, quote, "Young people are growing up immersed in this technology and their brains are more malleable, more plastic and changing. As the brain evolves and shifts its focus towards new technological skills, it drifts away from fundamental social skills." Looking at the neural correlates of compassion, the same kinds of things they're finding in terms of brain stimulation in the areas linked to compassion, linked to morality. They're not being stimulated, and there may very well be consequences in future. They concluded, again, this is the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, for some kinds of thought, especially moral decision-making, we need to allow for adequate time and reflection. If things are happening too fast, you might not ever fully experience emotions about other people's psychological states, and that would have implications for your morality.